All right, so we're going to work on lesson 4.2 today, representing decimals through thousands. So our objectives are we want to be able to represent decimals to the thousands place using base 10 numerals, number names, fractions, and thousands grids. We also want to be able to understand the place value system. Now, we're going to write the following decimals in standard form. Now, in standard form, a lot of times people forget what standard form means. We know it's not number word form or word form. So if we look down here, we can see we have the first one in word form. So 6 and 71 hundredths. Well, when I look at this, I see two things that are kind of weird in math. The THS at the end of the hundred there, and then and. Well, I know and represents a decimal when it's in word form, or when a number is in word form. So I know it's 6 and or a decimal, and then I see 71 hundredths. So I go over and I say tenths, hundredths, and I see 71 hundredths. So I fill in my spaces there. So the next one we look at is the 73, and I see and again, 75 hundredths. So I see the THS. So I write 73. The and means decimal, 65 hundredths. Okay, and again, I can double check that, and I say tenths, hundredths. The next one here we want to look, and again I see and I see THS, which tells me what it's going to be to the right of decimal. So I have 1, and I know and means my decimal, 9 hundredths. So I go tenths, hundredths, and I see it's not a two-digit number, so I put my 9 in the hundredths place and fill in the empty spot with a 0. Then I have 40 and, again I see and then I see THS, which tells me to the right of decimal. So I write 40 by decimal, and then I see 278,000. So this one's a little different. It goes to the thousands place. So I like to mark my spots ahead of time. So tenths, hundredths, thousands, and I see 278. So 278. So I get 40 and 278 thousandths. So today we're going to represent decimals by showing, symbolizing, or standing for something. For example, numbers we represent using base 10 blocks, spoken words, or written numerals. So we're going to use some of those today to represent our decimals. So the first thing you want to do is complete problems 1 through 3 in your math journal on page 114. So at this point, you want to pause the video and complete those. So take a minute, complete those, and when you're done, resume the video. All right, so now you should have completed 1 through 3 on your own in your math journal. So we're going to check together and see if you got the same idea, same thinking there. Okay, so write 43 hundredths in words. So I don't need to write 0 and 43 hundredths because the 0 doesn't have any value. So here I just say 43 hundredths. You must put the THS at the end of 100. If you don't, then that would be 43 hundredths or 4,300. Big difference. So again, if you put THS, then you're good. If you leave that off, you need to fix that because otherwise it would be a different value, be counted wrong. Now, write 43 hundredths in the place value chart. So as we look at this one, in the ones place, there's a 0. I put my decimal, and then there's a 4 in tenths place, a 3 in the hundredths, and we're going to leave this blank because there's nothing in the thousands place for that. So we're not going to do anything like that. And then we're going to represent it on a hundredths grid here. So it says shade to grid to show 43 hundredths. So another way you could think of this, you could rewrite this as 43 hundredths. Okay, so that helps you think about that. It's 43 hundredths. Okay, and so I should shade in 43 blocks because each one represents 1/100th of the grid. So I would want to shade in 43. And again, you may have chosen to shade on this side. You may have went from top to bottom, but you want to make sure that they're all touching. You should have 4 rows. So that would give me my 40 hundredths, and then 41, 42, 43 hundredths. So that's how we would represent 43 hundredths on a hundredths grid. How would each representation or way of showing 43 hundredths change instead of showing 432 thousandths? So let's look at some possible solutions there. So let's think about that. 43 hundredths and 432 thousandths. One representation would be using it in word form, and we would say 432 thousandths instead of 43 hundredths. Another representation that we could use is place value chart. The first 3 columns would stay the same. we'd write a 2 in the thousands column instead. So just like in that chart where we left it blank in the thousands, we could put a 2. And another representation would be a grid. We would need to split the squares into smaller parts. We'd still shade 4 full columns and 3 squares. We'd also have to shade thousands. We would have to divide hundreds square into 10 tiny pieces to represent thousands and shade 2 of them, which we'll look at a thousands grid in a minute. So today you'll explore ways to represent or show decimals to the thousands. Okay, so you can see here this is a thousands grid, okay? Each section here is worth, each square here is worth 10. Okay, so this is 10 thousandths. This whole thing here would be, think about that. So take a minute, think about that as we move on to the next slide. But if this is 10 thousandths, so 10 parts of 1,000 there. Then if we look here, just like we talked about, one of these would be 10 thousandths. So think about what one whole row here would be. So let's have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. So what do you think that would represent? We have 100 right there out of 1,000. So it would be 100 thousandths. Or I could even look at it and say, mark out my common zeros and say it's 1/10 of the grid. Okay. Now, if the whole grid represents 1, what does one small square represent? Okay, so I know that's 10. I'm going to erase this one. I know that's 10 out of 1,000. And I could mark off my common 0 here and here, and I could say that it's also 1/100th or 10 thousandths. Okay, because that there. So you can see you get 1/10 or 10 thousandths. So this whole thing would be 100 thousandths. This one here would be 10 thousandths or 1/100th. Okay, so you could look at it either way there. So it could be 10 thousandths or it could be 100. And if you go back again to here, you'd see this one would be 100 thousandths because you have 10 of these. Or it could also be represented as 1/10 of the grid. Okay. Now, and then you have one little square, or sorry, rectangle. So we know that's 1 out of 1,000. So that'd be 1/1000th. Okay, so each one of those represents 1/1000th. Now, a column of 1/10 of the whole grid is just like 1/10 of 1. A small square is 1/10 of a column, just like 100th is 1/10 of 10. A tiny rectangle is 1/10 of a small square, just like 1,000th is 1/10 of 100th. Now, I'm going to do this one with you. How would you shade thousands grid to show 432 thousandths? Okay, so I see first 432 thousandths, so I know I have to shade in 400. And I know that one of these rows equals 100. So I would shade that in, and you want to shade it in fully. I'm just doing it kind of quickly here. So there's 100. I would do a second one. And again, you want to shade these in fully with your pencil. There's 200, 300, and then 400. And again, you want to stay in the boxes. Again, I'm doing just kind of filling this in quickly. And again, you want to shade in all those. So I would get 1, 2, 3, 4 rows. And it's 430. So I did the 4 because it's 400. And then 32 thousandths. So now I know that this whole square is 10. So that gives me 410, 420, 430. And then I have 432. So I shade in 2 boxes. Okay, so if I outline this, you should see here And again, your shading should be complete. It'll be a little easier to do with a pencil. So again, you want to make sure yours is solid shaded in here. So you don't want to have any open spots on there. Okay? So you can see there, we go through. And then it's always good to kind of trace it just to make sure that you have it there. So that's 432,000. So I have 100, 200, 300, 400, 410, 420, 430, 132. So 432 thousandths. Okay, and you can see here a little bit better model shaded in the 4 rows for 400. And then you have the 3 in the hundreds place. And so you can see here that they did 1, 2, 3 of those. And then they added in the 2 at the end. Okay, so you can see they're all consecutive together. They're completely filled in. Again, using the smartboard is a little bit harder to fill them in, but you want to make sure you're doing that with your pencil. Okay, so what would this representation of the decimal grid be? So if I look here, I can see here's 1 row 100. Here's 2 all the way down. Here's 3. So this would be 1, 2, 3. Okay, so let's think about that. That's 300 out of 1,000, right? So I like to write it first a fraction, 300 thousandths, or I could write it decimal form and write 300 thousandths, right? Or you could even break that down and say that it is 3/10. That would be equivalent as well, okay? So you can see here, when we look at these grids, each of them start with 3 in the tenths place, and this one is 300 thousandths because it's out of a thousandths grid. This one says 30 hundredths because it's out of a hundredths grid, and this one is 3/10 because it's out of a tenths grid. But if you look at all three, they cover the same amount of area, okay? It's just the pieces are broken into smaller for thousandths. When you look at the hundredths, the pieces are the same amount, cover the same amount, but a little bit bigger, and then the tenths are even bigger. But they all represent the same value. So with whole numbers, each additional 0 causes the digit to move to a different place value position. So when we look at these, we're going to do this one here together. For problems 4 through 6, use words or words, fractions, equivalent decimals, and other representations to write at least 3 names for each decimal in the name collection box. Then shade the grid to show the decimal. Okay, so I see that it's 8/10, but it's a thousandths grid. So to make it easier for me to understand the color, I'm going to add zeros till I get to the thousandths. So let's see, that would be 80 tenths, and this would be 800 thousandths. Okay, now on this grid it's kind of hard to see, but you count over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, that'd be 1 row, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Go over. It should be more clear in your book. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, should be 8. Okay, and then we would shade in each of these to get 800 thousandths because we know that each row represents 100 thousandths. Okay, so color all that in. Again, yours should be a lot neater than mine. You should be able to see it clear and fill it in. So I will trace around so you can see where it should be. And all that should be shaded in solid. So let's see some other names. I already have 8/10, and it says up here I could use words, fractions, equivalent decimals, or other representations. So this would be other representations over here. So let's see an equivalent decimal. I already did. Let's see words. I could say 800 thousandths. And you want to really fit it all in the same box there. My writing's just a little bit bigger. So let's see, I did word form, I did equivalent fraction. I could write this as a fraction. I could say 800 thousandths. I can also write it as 8/10. And there's many more representations we could do there. All right, so let's see what they suggest here. Okay, so if we go back here, I'll erase this so you can see they said 80 hundredths, 800 thousandths, 8/10ths, 8/10ths, and 80 hundredths. So you could do any of those. Okay, there's many answers, equivalent things there. And again, you can see where I colored, it's all filled in there. Now, we'll do one more here together. So let's see, we said fraction form, so let's do that first. So 620 thousandths. The other thing I notice on this one is that it's out of the thousandths already, and I have a thousandths grid, so that's helpful, I think. So I could say 62 tenths, but let's actually change that, and let's say 620, 600, 100, 20, thousands. So let's see, we did fraction form, we've done word form, and now let's do an equivalent decimal. So obviously I can't write 620,000 again, but I could do 62 hundredths because I could just drop that 0, and that would be equivalent there as well. So those are a few examples, okay, that we could do there. Now if we look here, it'll do the shading for us. And so you can see there are 6 rows for the 600, and then there are 2 squares colored in because those two together equal 20. So let's go back here and look at some of the answers they have. They did the word form, 62 hundredths. They did decimal form, 62 hundredths. So if you just drop off the 0, it still represents the same amount, just the pieces will be a little larger. 620 thousandths, 62 over 100, which is 62 hundredths, or 620 thousandths. Okay, so all of those would work and would be equivalent. Now, in closing of our lesson today, tell a member of the other group one thing to help them accomplish the goal. Okay, so when we're in small group, that's something that you guys can talk about there. What are some things